The first time I stayed over at his house, I swore nothing would happen. By the third time, I realized I wasn't swearing to him, I was swearing to myself. It started as something innocent. My best friend, Noah, had this older brother named Ethan, a quiet, steady guy who worked nights as a paramedic and smelled faintly of antiseptic and cedarwood. He was everything Noah wasn't: calm, mature, grounded. The kind of man you didn't think about twice until he looked at you in that slow, careful way, as if he already knew every lie you'd ever told. The first night I stayed over, Noah passed out after too many beers, leaving me on the couch. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of rain hitting the windows and the soft creak of the hallway floorboards. Ethan appeared in the dim light, wearing a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, holding a blanket. "You'll freeze out here," he said, voice quiet, almost embarrassed. He tossed me the blanket, but our fingers brushed. I told myself it meant nothing, just warmth, just decency. But when he looked at me, something inside me shifted, deep and terrifying, like the first tremor before a storm. Ethan was 5 years older than me, 27, with the kind of patience that felt like gravity. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight. Noah always joked that Ethan was emotionally constipated. But I saw something else, a quiet sadness behind his smiles, the kind of loneliness that comes from seeing too much, saving people who sometimes didn't want to be saved. We became friends, I guess. When Noah and I hung out at their house, Ethan would cook or help us fix things. He'd ask how my classes were going, if I was still writing, still playing guitar. Small things that felt too personal coming from him. And then there were the nights. Sometimes I'd crash at their place after a movie or study session. Noah would always fall asleep first, snoring like a chainsaw. Ethan would stay up reading, the soft light from his lamp glowing under his bedroom door. One night when I couldn't sleep, I knocked. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Not really." He gestured for me to come in. The air smelled faintly of coffee and rain. I sat on the edge of his bed, pretending not to notice how close we were. He didn't say much that night, just asked if I was okay. And when I didn't answer, he said quietly, "Sometimes, silence says more than we want it to." It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something dangerous, the beginning of wanting what you shouldn't. I wish I could say things stayed simple, but nothing involving hidden hearts ever does. Noah started noticing things. The way Ethan looked at me too long. The way I'd linger in the kitchen when Ethan got home late. He'd joke about it, but I could feel the suspicion growing. "You two getting close, huh?" he said once, smirking, but there was an edge to it. "Yeah, he's just easy to talk to," I said, too fast. Noah narrowed his eyes. "Just be careful, okay? Ethan's complicated." He didn't know how right he was. The breaking point came one weekend in October. Noah had gone on a camping trip, leaving me alone in their house. I promised to watch the place, feed the dog, water the plants. Ethan was supposed to be on shift, but he came home early, soaked from the rain, exhausted. "Bad night?" I asked. He nodded, sitting heavily on the couch. "Lost a kid," he said quietly. "We tried everything." I didn't know what to say. I sat beside him, the TV flickering blue light across his face. Then he did something I didn't expect. He leaned into me, forehead resting against my shoulder. Just for a second. "I'm sorry," I whispered. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "Don't be." And then, without warning, he kissed me. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It was soft, aching, restrained. The kind of kiss that said, "I've wanted this for longer than I should." When he pulled away, we just sat there in silence, the rain outside blurring the world into something unreal. "This can't happen," he said finally. I nodded, but the truth was already out, burning between us like a secret that refused to die. After that night, things got harder. Ethan avoided me when Noah was around. He barely looked at me, barely spoke. But when our eyes met, I could feel the pull, that silent gravity dragging me back toward him. One night, after another group hangout at their place, Noah went to bed early again. I was about to leave when Ethan came downstairs. "You walking home?" he asked. "Yeah. It's raining. I'll drive you." The car ride was quiet, the windshield wipers whispering against the glass. We didn't speak until he parked outside my apartment. "Ethan," I said, hand on the door handle, "do you regret it?" He turned to me slowly. "Every day. That hurt. More than I expected. But I'd do it again," he added, his voice breaking slightly. "If I knew it'd feel like that." Something inside me cracked wide open. Before I could stop myself, I leaned in, and this time he didn't resist. The kiss was deeper, heavier, filled with everything we couldn't say out loud. When we finally pulled apart, his hand was trembling. "I can't give you what you deserve," he whispered, "but I can't stop wanting to." From that night on, every visit felt like walking a tightrope. We tried to act normal around Noah, laughed at the same jokes, watched the same movies, pretended nothing was wrong. But beneath the surface, everything was wrong. There were glances that lasted too long, accidental touches that weren't accidents, the quiet ache of pretending not to care when all I wanted was to hold him. I started writing songs again. Every lyric bled with him, the way his hands shook after a long night, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way his voice dropped when he said my name. He heard one of them once, when I thought he wasn't home. I was playing softly in Noah's room, my guitar resting on my knee. The lyrics were simple, raw, about loving someone you weren't supposed to love. When I finished, I turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway. "That song," he said, "it's about me, isn't it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He crossed the room, slowly, carefully, like he was walking toward the edge of something. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," he said, voice low. "Then stop me." He didn't. That night was the first time we stopped pretending. It wasn't rushed or reckless. It was quiet, desperate, almost reverent. Every touch felt like a confession, every breath a promise we weren't allowed to make. When it was over, he held me like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. But morning came, as it always does, cruel and cold. Noah knocked on the door, calling my name. Panic shot through both of us. I grabbed my shirt, my heart pounding. Ethan looked at me, eyes wide, terrified not for himself, but for me. I slipped out the back door before Noah could see. That day, Ethan didn't text, didn't call, and for weeks after, nothing. When I finally saw him again, it was at the hospital. Noah had twisted his ankle during a soccer game, and Ethan was on shift. He treated his brother like nothing was wrong, professional, composed. But when our eyes met across the room, I saw it. The same ache, the same longing, buried deep. He handed Noah some ice and paperwork, then turned to me. "Can I talk to you?" he asked quietly. We stepped outside into the parking lot, the late afternoon sun blinding. "I'm leaving," he said. "Got a job offer in Oregon. I can't stay here anymore." The world tilted. "When?" "Next week." I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. He reached out, brushed a thumb across my cheek, just once. "You'll be okay," he whispered. Then he turned and walked away. It should have ended there. But love, real love, never dies cleanly. I saw him again months later by accident. I was performing at a small open mic downtown, playing one of my songs, the one he'd heard that night. The crowd was small, the lights soft, and there he was, standing in the back, his face half-lit, eyes shining. When I finished, he waited until everyone left before approaching. "You kept writing," he said. "Couldn't stop." He smiled, that small, quiet smile I'd missed so much. "Neither could I." And then, for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because he came back. He looked different that night, tired, older somehow, but softer too. The kind of softness that only comes from surrendering to something you can't fight anymore. We sat outside after my performance, the city humming quietly around us. A food truck sizzled across the street, the scent of grilled onions in the cool air. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," he said finally. "I wasn't sure I'd still want to be," I replied, half joking, half aching. He looked at me, and there it was again, that silent understanding that didn't need words. "I heard the song," he said. "Every line. You still sing like you mean it." I meant every word. The pause between us stretched, long and fragile. Then he said, I tried to move on. I really did. But every time I looked at someone else, I thought of you. Something inside me cracked. Then why did you leave? He exhaled, eyes heavy. Because I thought walking away would protect you. I laughed bitterly. From what? From me. From this. From what people would say if they ever found out. His voice trembled for the first time I'd ever heard. It wasn't fear of loving, it was fear of being seen. I took a step closer. Do you still care what they think? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I could see the war behind his eyes, the pull between duty and desire, between protecting others and choosing himself for once. You can't keep saving everyone, I whispered. Sometimes, it's okay to save yourself. He looked at me like he wanted to believe that, and for a fleeting second I thought maybe, just maybe, he did. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a ghost in my days and a storm in my nights. He stayed in town longer than he said he would. He claimed the transfer paperwork was delayed, but I knew the truth. He couldn't leave. Not yet. We saw each other in secret. Late-night coffee runs that turned into long drives with music low and windows half open. Small touches exchanged under the pretense of friendship. The kind of love that hides in plain sight, disguised as everything it's not. But secrets always demand their price. One night after a long shift, Ethan called me. His voice was quiet, ragged. Can you come over? When I arrived, the house was dark except for the light in his room. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. I froze tonight, he said. On the job. It's never happened before. What do you mean? There was a kidatan run. We got there in time, but I just stood there. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. One of the other medics had to take over. He looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed and wet. What if I'm not who I thought I was? I sat beside him. You're human, Ethan. You're allowed to break. He shook his head. Not when people depend on me. Then depend on me, I said quietly. He turned then, as if the words had physically struck him. You don't know what you're asking for. Maybe I do. And then I kissed him. Not like the first time, not hesitant or scared. This one was raw, desperate. His hands found my face. Mine clutched his shirt. And everything he'd been holding back poured out between us. It wasn't about lust, it was about relief. The relief of being seen, of being allowed to need. Afterward, we lay in silence. His heartbeat slowed under my cheek. For a while it felt like peace. But peace, I was learning, never lasted long in stories like ours. The next morning, we woke to the sound of footsteps. Noah's voice echoed from the kitchen. Ethan? You home? My blood froze. I scrambled for my clothes, nearly tripping over his boots. Ethan's face drained of color. Go, he whispered. Ethan, please. There was no time to argue. I slipped out the window into the backyard just as Noah entered the hall. My heart hammered against my ribs as I ducked behind the fence, breath fogging in the cold air. From inside, I could hear their voices. Were you up all night again? Noah asked. Yeah, Ethan said, too steady, too calm. Couldn't sleep. You look like hell. I feel like it. Noah laughed, but there was suspicion beneath it. You sure you're not hiding someone in there? My lungs stopped working. Funny, Ethan said flatly. You really think I have time for that? Noah snorted. Right? You, the saint of Seattle. I didn't breathe until I heard the front door shut again. When Ethan finally texted me, it's safe now, my hands were still shaking. For weeks after, guilt sat heavy between us. Not guilt for what we'd done, but for what we couldn't admit. I stopped staying over. Noah noticed. Did I do something? He asked one day, his tone unusually serious. You barely come around anymore. It's not you, I said. Just busy. He frowned. Ethan told me the same thing. You two in a fight or something? Something like that. He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. Whatever it is, fix it. You're both acting weird. I forced a smile. Yeah, I'll try. But fixing it wasn't simple. Because the truth was, Ethan and I weren't broken, we're hidden. And hiding can feel like safety until it starts feeling like suffocation. Winter came early that year, cold enough to turn breath into fog and hearts brittle with longing. I tried to bury myself in schoolwork, music, anything to distract from the echo of his absence. But everything reminded me of him: the coffee shop near his work, the flannel shirt he'd once lent me, the smell of rain on asphalt. Then one evening, I came home to find an envelope under my door. No name, no address, just my name written in his handwriting. Inside was a short note. Leaving tomorrow. No goodbyes this time. You deserve more than waiting. Please don't come to the station. E. I stared at the paper until the ink blurred from my tears. Then I did exactly what he told me not to. The ambulance station was almost empty when I got there. The night air bit at my skin as I spotted him loading gear into the back of a van. He froze when he saw me. I told you not to come, he said. You don't get to decide that anymore. He sighed, glancing around. This isn't the time. When is it ever the time, Ethan? My voice broke. Every time I try to love you, you run. He looked at me then, raw and unguarded. Because loving me ruins people. Then let me be ruined, I said. He closed the distance between us in 2 steps, his hands cupping my face. His eyes shimmered under the station lights, full of everything we couldn't say in public. I can't stay, he whispered. I'm not asking you to. I kissed him one last time, slow, aching, final. The kind of kiss that feels like both a beginning and an ending. When we pulled apart, I smiled through the tears. Just promise me one thing, I said. Don't disappear again. He nodded. I'll find a way back to you. And then he left. Months passed. No texts. No calls. At first, I checked my phone constantly, counting the hours since I'd last heard his voice. But eventually, silence became the new normal. I graduated, started working at a local radio station. I learned how to smile without breaking, how to sleep without dreaming of him. But love has a way of looping back when you least expect it. One rainy evening, I was leaving the studio when someone called my name. I turned and there he was, Ethan. He looked the same and completely different all at once. Beard a little thicker, hair a bit longer, but those eyes still that same quiet storm. Hey, he said softly. My heart slammed into my ribs. You're back. He nodded. Transfer didn't stick. Turns out, I'm terrible at running away. A laugh broke through my tears. You think. He smiled, tired, genuine. I never stopped thinking about you. I swallowed hard. Then why wait so long? Because I wanted to be someone who deserved to come back. The wind picked up, scattering raindrops across us. And just like that night months ago, we stood there under a gray Seattle sky, caught between what was and what could be. He reached for my hand. This time I didn't pull away. From then on, things didn't magically fall into place. We still had to be careful about Noah, about work, about the world that wasn't kind to stories like ours. But love isn't about ease. It's about persistence. Ethan started volunteering at a community center, teaching first aid classes. I played music there sometimes on weekends. We built a life in small, quiet moments: morning coffees, shared glances, inside jokes whispered in crowded rooms. No grand declarations, no cinematic gestures. Just love that survived in silence and grew stronger because of it. One night, while we were closing up the center, he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I told you I'd find my way back, he murmured. I leaned into him, smiling. And I told you I'd wait. He kissed the side of my neck, gentle and sure. You're my home, he said. It was simple, but it was everything. Of course, nothing stayed secret forever. Noah found out on a Sunday afternoon. He came to the center unannounced, dropping off some old medical supplies. I was tuning my guitar when I heard his voice in the doorway. Ethan? You here? Ethan froze. I turned, panic flashing between us. Then Noah's eyes landed on our hands interlocked, unhidden. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, he said, So that's why you both went weird on me. Noah, Ethan started. But Noah raised a hand. Save it. Just tell me one thing. How long? Ethan swallowed. A while. Noah looked between us, disbelief and betrayal twisting across his face. You me brother and you me best friend? I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He laughed bitterly. Unbelievable. Ethan stepped forward. Noah, it's not what you think. Really? Because it looks exactly like what I think. The tension cracked in the air like thunder. Noah turned to leave, shaking his head. Don't bother calling me, he said. Either of you. The door slammed. Ethan stood there, motionless. Then he sank into a chair, face in his hands. I've lost him, he whispered. I knelt beside him. You didn't lose him. You told him the truth. He looked at me, eyes full of pain. Sometimes the truth costs too much. I took his hand. Then we'll pay it together. For weeks, Noah didn't speak to either of us. But time, I learned, has a way of softening sharp edges. One day, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. Can I come in? He asked. I nodded, heart in my throat. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck. Ethan told me everything, he said. About how it started. About you. I didn't know what to say. He sighed. Look, I was pissed. Mostly because I felt lied to. But if he's happy, and you're happy, maybe that's all that matters. I blinked, stunned. You mean that? Yeah. He cracked a small smile. Still weird, though. My best friend and my brother. I laughed through the tears. Tell me about it. He clapped my shoulder. Just don't break his heart. He's been through enough. I won't, I promised. That night, I told Ethan what happened. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into his arms and held me tight. For the first time in a long time, it felt like the world wasn't against us. We weren't hiding. We weren't running. We were here. And maybe that was enough. The following spring was the first time I ever saw Ethan truly happy. He smiled more, laughed easier, and started leaving his phone face up on the table instead of keeping it flipped over like before. The quiet guilt that had once shadowed him was gone. In its place, there was light, the kind that made everything around him feel safe again. We'd moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city, above a flower shop that always smelled like lilies and rain. It wasn't perfect. The heater made strange noises at night and the floorboards creaked whenever you tried to sneak to the kitchen, but it was ours. Some nights, I'd wake to find Ethan reading on the couch, glasses slipping down his nose, the lamp casting a halo of warm light around him. Other times, he'd fall asleep first, and I'd lie awake just listening to his breathing, the soft, steady rhythm that reminded me I wasn't alone anymore. It's strange, the way love grows. At first, it's wild and terrifying, a rush you can't control. But then it softens. It becomes the way someone remembers your coffee order, or how they reach for your hand at a red light without even thinking. That was us. No longer fire but warmth. One evening, Noah dropped by with pizza. It was awkward at first. We hadn't all been in the same room since the day he found out. But time heals what silence can't. So, he said, grabbing a slice. You two are disgustingly domestic now, huh? Ethan smirked. We try. Noah shook his head, laughing. If Mom were still here, she'd probably freak out for 10 minutes, then start knitting you guys matching sweaters. Yeah, Ethan said softly. She would. The mood lightened after that. We talked for hours about work, about music, about everything that had been too fragile to touch before. When Noah finally left, he hugged me. I'm glad you stuck around, he said quietly. Me too. As he walked out into the cool night, I looked at Ethan and realized how far we'd come from stolen glances in shadowed hallways to this. A life built on truth instead of fear. That summer, I was invited to perform at a local festival, a small stage by the pier, waves crashing in the distance. Ethan stood in the crowd, hands in his pockets, his eyes on me the whole time. I played one of my old songs, the one he'd first heard through Noah's door. But this time, it wasn't a confession, it was a celebration. When I finished, he was the first to clap. Then the crowd followed, their applause rolling across the water like thunder. Afterward, he met me by the boardwalk. The evening sky was painted with streaks of gold and pink. "You were incredible," he said. "I was singing about you." He smiled. "I know." And then, in front of everyone, the strangers, the waves, the open sky, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't careful. It was real. For the first time, I didn't care who saw. In the months that followed, we started talking about the future not as a dream, but as something possible. Ethan wanted to open a small clinic one day, one that focused on helping people who couldn't afford care. I wanted to record an album, maybe even tour. Two impossible dreams. I joked one night as we lay in bed. He turned to me, eyes soft. "Nothing's impossible anymore." I smiled, tracing the scar on his hand from one of his old rescues. "You really believe that?" "I believe in you," he said. "And that's enough for me." Autumn came again, the same season it all began. We visited Noah's house for dinner, the place where everything started years ago. The old couch was still there, the same creaky floors, the same rain tapping softly against the windows. Felt like coming full circle. After dinner, Noah went to bed early, leaving us in the living room. Ethan looked around, smiling faintly. "Feels smaller than I remember." "Maybe we just got bigger," I said. He nodded, pulling me closer. "You know, I used to think what we had was wrong, that love like this couldn't survive the world. And now," he looked into my eyes, steady and sure. "Now I know it's the only thing that ever made me feel alive." The storm outside grew louder, thunder rolling in the distance. We sat there in the dim glow of the old lamp, wrapped in a silence that felt sacred. He rested his forehead against mine. "If I could go back, I'd do it all again, every mistake, every secret, every kiss, just to end up right here." My chest tightened. "Me too." We didn't need any more words. Years later, when people asked how we met, we never gave the whole story. We'd smile, share a glance, and I'd say, "Through a friend." They didn't need to know about the nights spent hiding, or the guilt that almost tore us apart. They didn't need to know about the fear, or the heartbreak, or the endless waiting. All that mattered was this: we loved and we endured. Because love, real love, doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet persistence of two hearts that refuse to let go, no matter what the world says. On our 5th anniversary, I released a new song called "Stay the Night." It wasn't about pain or loss or secrecy. It was about peace, about finding home in someone's heartbeat, about all the small, ordinary miracles that keep two people together after everything. When I played it live, Ethan stood backstage, tears shining in his eyes. After the show, he pulled me into his arms and whispered, "That's us, isn't it?" I smiled. "Every note." He laughed softly, brushing his thumb over my cheek. "Then promise me you'll never stop writing about us." I couldn't stop if I tried. We kissed under the stage lights, the crowd's applause echoing somewhere far behind us. And for once, it didn't feel like an ending. Felt like the start of forever. Sometimes I still think about that first night, the blanket he threw me, the quiet look in his eyes, the storm outside. Back then, I didn't know what that moment would become. Now I do. It was the beginning of everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.